hopefully Alderman Davis will join us in progress.
Okay, you're ready to go.
Good morning, all. This is a meeting of the city's capital committee. Today is Tuesday, October 19th. Following up on last week's meeting, we did have some information that we were going to follow up on some of the projects. Let me share my screen real quickly with you all, just to refresh everyone's memory. This was a scenario that was drafted last week that we discussed in general terms, which identified some of the available funding sources for this capital appropriation that we were looking at. We also had some other items that we wanted to discuss. But in going over this materials, we did have a few more details to ferret out. And I know Rich prepared some documents on particularly this these recreation piece regarding rec centers and pools and roof replacements and such. So Rich, let me see, I can pull that up screen too. Let me see if I can do this. And pull this up, which is a document. Pull it on screen total. You can see it all. Did you want? Could you walk through this detail on what we've got before us on the detail for your rec center improvements?
Sure. So in the original proposal that we had put out, there were 3 items under C: Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. Rec center boiler replacements, 6 of 30 at $944,000. Pool renovations, 1 of 7 at $1 million, and rec center roof replacements at $2.5 million. And so what I did was work with Kim Hagley and Greg Hayes to establish the priority list of the order, depending on the funding that we all decided to allocate, how they would be funded. So, for example, we'll take the first one, the roofs on the recreation centers, $2.5 million. There are 8 recreation centers shown there that are in substantial need of roof replacement. I do note under the first one that Buda Rec Center, even though it is the worst roof, it is the lowest usage of all the rec centers as indicated by the Parks Department. So theoretically, we could take that one and move it to the end of the list and take care of the other ones first, as they would be the ones that have the most usage. So that $2.5 million would theoretically replace or substantially repair all those 8 roofs at the rec centers that are noted. You moved to boiler replacements. This was a portion of what was suggested for total replacement. There were a total of 30 boilers at the rec centers for $5 million. If you break that out, that is approximately $167,000 per boiler for repair or replacement. So again, I work with Parks Department, Parks Director and Commissioner, and they provided me this list of the rec center priorities, the most important from first to last, boiler repairs and replacements, and the number of boilers at each. So if we did this $944,000, theoretically, we could replace the boilers or repair the boilers at Tandy and Marquette Rec Center, as that would take care of about 5 boilers. Any additional funding, we would just continue on down that list, trying to knock off one whole rec center at a time to get their boilers taken care of. And then finally, the pool renovations, 3 outdoor, 4 indoor pools, $7 million, about $1 million per pool is what we had allotted originally. And so on this list here, we had put down a priority of about $1 million. The list shows 4 indoor pools, with Tandy Rec Center being the most in need. Now, we would start with Tandy, and obviously if it came in under $1 million, then we would move down to 12th and Park and use the remainder of the funding there, and so forth and so on. So any additional monies that we would put into these items up to the cap amounts, which are shown there, this is the order that we would do the projects in.
So in that $50 million scenario that we were just going over last week, and I just pulled up a few minutes ago. So in we had 2.5 for the roof. So that covered all of these roofs. That's correct. And then we had, as you said, we have 944, which is only about 5 or 6, maybe these first 2 centers with their boilers, and depending on what the actual costs come in at. And then with the pool renovations, we had $1 million. So that would take care of Tandy's pool in theory. So any additional funds that we provide would just enable you to work down the list of these the boiler replacements and the pool renovations. Okay, so that's the detail on parks and rec. Are there any questions on these in particular? Okay, well, let me go back to the list. And pull that up. So the other item, we had an outstanding request on. I think Judy, you had mentioned about identifying the infrastructure related to the phone system. You called earlier today and saying that there's issues about that. Did you want to just detail what you told me basically?
Right. What I had said was it's hard to break out just the infrastructure in terms of the wiring. Once the wiring starts, even though we did it in phases, the phone system itself, once it goes in, the whole cost of the phone system, that would go in. After I talked to you, Paul, I was trying to work out some figures here in terms of what could possibly help, even, let's say, if we could possibly do this from January to June. But one thing I do want to note, last night, I was here until 9 o'clock, just working on work orders from one of the specialists. And I just want to note that in doing that, going through the work orders, there were over 100 for just a 6-week period. I was looking at them, trying to see where they're coming from. And all of these work orders are coming from reports in the locations that we've named. I looked at them. We got them from the mayor's office, from juvenile, the civil and corner hand, collector of revenue, fire department, EMS, comptroller's office, board of aldermen. So all of these phones are having issues, and we've got to do something to move this forward. But what I'm looking at now, possibly with the phone system going in and looking at partial wiring and stuff as we're doing this and going through it, it looks like if maybe that would be maybe $2,082,600 in order to get this started and to start in the phase to start working on some of these.
Okay.
And I'll send this. I mean, I've been working on this all morning, really trying to figure out. I hate giving numbers, and it's just really a guess as to what's going to happen and going in this. But just something that we can get started and get the system updated in the time frame that we have.
Right. Yeah, some of the questions I've been getting, it relates not too much to needing to do this in terms of improving the phones and getting the phone system, but whether or not there's an efficiency or a synergy between doing that as well as our IT systems at the same time, to where you've got anything, you don't want to be duplicating any work that you do from the phone side as opposed to the information system side, so that whatever we get is the latest tech and the most efficient way of doing it from a capital standpoint. And that's
right.
Questions I've had, at least some members have expressed to me. I don't know, I'll open it up to any other members of the committee that have any questions on that. Okay.
Paul, is there not an entity available that can come in and give us a good overview of the options that we have, because we're just talking about some phones, and phones is not the answer to 21st century communication. It's not just a phone. And
No,
we
it's,
need to integrate it. We need to integrate it with our computer systems, because phone calls can come through and go out through your computer. I even have an issue with the fact that our administrators, executive assistants, they can't even walk from their desk. They don't have the appropriate system set up where they can be moving around and answering calls and having those calls logged for them. We just gotta do better. We just got to.
Is there, when we look at that and we look at what our options are, and maybe this is a question both for phones as well as it's is there a consultant in the field that would be able to help us with that and identifying what those best efforts would be? And what I mean by that is, I know we didn't want to have AT&T present because they would be a potential bidder on phones. We don't want to have that. But outside that, I know
tech companies in this town.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was getting at. Something that could say, hey, here's the best practices that are out there, and what can we look at, and here's maybe what other cities are doing, what's working and what's not. And given that we've got this opportunity to do it all at once, and we've got these potential funds available, what options do we have that are out there that can present, and given the timetable we've got to work with?
Have we talked to Cindy yet about this?
I haven't heard from Information Systems on that particularly, but it seems like both Judy's shop and It's a shop probably need to combine their minds together on this and see what it is what's possible. I mean, some things might not be possible, other ones are, but we want to get a little deeper dive into what the possibilities are, so that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck.
just in terms of the Alderwoman's question and stuff, this is up-to-date technology. So I do understand what you're saying. The phone system that's coming in is it will take you, you mentioned before about the 23rd century. It's going to take you beyond that in terms of what all it can do. A lot of the stuff we don't even use that these systems can do. So it will do that. But I mean, having somebody to come in and talk about what's out there, the technology and stuff. One of the things we talked about at the last meeting too was that always wanted to keep it separate, because you don't want your phones and your computer and all that stuff to go down at the same time. And everything would be out. So it's one of those things that even prior to my working on this, that they've always had a notion to keep it all separate. But I mean, I have no problem in getting someone to come in and talk about, the systems we're looking at and that it meets the needs that this committee is looking for.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And maybe if we can get both your shop and ITSA together and bring somebody else in who could sort of advise us on what those options are, that would be great.
Yeah, one thing we want to make sure we do is that we all have a good, clear understanding on exactly what it is that we're paying for.
Okay.
And then that way, as you know, everybody has a lot of opinions today, and they have many platforms to share their opinions. And so the more information we have to be clear, it makes it better. So hopefully we can get that.
Okay. All right. Well, let me go back to the list again. Well, this was the scenario that we had put out for contemplation last week. Now, I did get an update on one number on here. And that's under the general obligation bond interest, that $1,350,000. Now I'm told that the go live date for both the new accounting system and payroll system has been pushed back to what's going to be this quarter, but now it's going to be the first quarter of next year, and that's going to cost more. And so based on that, this $1,350,000 is not going to be available because that was one of the items funded under the last GOB. So those funds wouldn't be available. So that leaves us with the ARPA, the half surplus, and the EcoDevo monies that we were talking about. As I was thinking about this list, and Rich was working on this pretty much in detail, but what other potential items do we want to potentially fund in this scenario? One of the things that struck me about this is that as I mentioned it before, is you're trying to, the list of backlog projects is so long that no matter what you hit, you've got a need there. And the idea is that we're trying to hit a somewhat of a sweet spot where, you've got a lot of things that need to be done. It's behind the scene type stuff, the plumbing repairs and these, but you also want the arterials and things like that people can actually see and appreciate and have the service of that's visible. And so in doing that, Rich has been working on sort of fleshing out some of these additional project and priority items that would potentially be a scenario. And so if I could, I'll also pull that up and let's see. Because we were at 50 and on ARPA, but if we could get that dollar amount up, and this we'll have to discuss among ourselves. Here's the first item on here was, okay, the GOB interest money is not available because it's going to be used for the accounting system. That's the $1,350,000. So that automatically makes our funds go up on the ARPA side. But Rich, I'll leave this to you. You want to go through this list and just sort of highlight what you identified? Because we had talked about if we wanted to fund additional items, what would they be? And sort of keeping in mind the citizens review as well as what you identified as some priorities.
Sure. So I started off right off the bat with arterial paving of major arterials in the city. A lot of the reason because I think everyone here would agree, many of the streets are beat up pretty bad. But really beyond that, in the Citizen Advisory Committee, what we heard so often is, what are we going to see when this is done? And, many things are behind the wall or in city buildings or vehicles and things most people wouldn't readily notice. So, I thought that these arterial street paving projects would be probably a good approach. Now, the reason I selected the ones in order that I did is the street department. The street commissioner provided me with a rating on the pavement condition indices to show from worst to best. And actually, the 4 streets that I have picked out are the 4 more or less worst streets in the city today and appear to me to be the major arterials that people would see and use quite frequently. The next item that I jumped down to was, and it was brought up certainly in the last capital meeting and certainly obviously an issue when you start talking about fire alarm systems. And so I put the City Hall fire alarm system in at $1.7 million, as obviously a lot of public use this building every day, as well as our employees. Going down just a little bit further, this is an item that you have not seen, and I will just highlight this. The Police Foundation approached me most recently, and they would like to put $1 million into our area police substations, the 3 of them, North, Central, and South. Their work would entail painting, lighting, ceiling and tile replacements, as well as all new interior fixtures and equipment to be donated by US Bank. What they asked in return is a commitment from the city for $150,000 worth of efforts on our part. And that could entail things such as plumbing upgrades, replacing toilet, sink fixtures, some ductwork cleaning, and just some general cleaning throughout the building. But to me, and mentioning this to Paul, you know, on something like this where you're getting an 8 to 9 to 1 match in a donation for putting something in, that is a pretty nice investment for something we otherwise wouldn't have funding for. Dropping down to the next one, as I had mentioned previously on the previous slide, if we wanted to add additional funding to boiler replacements, that would, in my opinion, be the right approach. We're covering the roofs. Now we want to heat those buildings. I cannot stress to everyone on this committee that if a boiler fails in one of these buildings in the dead of winter, and we had one fail last year, the pipes freeze, they break, it creates hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage that we just cannot repair. And I know you are all aware that the city is self-insured, so it's not that we have a insurance policy or anything along those lines. We have to eat that cost when it happens. So beyond the normal thought of that, you know, the rec center would be out of business for our residents to use, it can create a lot of damage. The next one on the list, you know, Judy, I had you in mind here. The municipal garage, in my opinion, still has a substantial amount of repairs that need to be done over there. You know, Judy and I and my staff talk constantly about, you know, all the vehicles that park in there and damage that can and does happen. And it is just a very old building. It's in need of, you know, waterproofing, concrete repairs, things to make it safe to utilize. And I know I can see Judy shaking her head. I think she would completely agree with me on that. Central Industrial, this is a facility that we bought over on Central Industrial Drive today. It's a complex that houses the repair of the fire and refuse vehicles. And next to that is a vacant space. That was the chem lab area. It is vacant today. And then next to that is the bus company, Illinois Central. We own that facility. The roof over the chem lab and Illinois Central Bus Company needs to be replaced. We showed pictures of that in a presentation. The chem lab area could very well be utilized for other city space, which we are contemplating now. But even beyond that, since we own these facilities, we lease part of the facility, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that the leak doesn't roof doesn't leak, excuse me, I'm backwards. And then finally is the additional city vehicles. We had put about $8 million, 8,000,001 in here for city vehicle replacement, non-police, non-fire. There was additional 1.1 put in for a lease purchase of refuse vehicles that we aren't going to do. But originally that list was right about 9.3 million. So again, I would say that if there is any additional funding that can be contemplated, we need these critical city vehicles for operation daily. And, you know, Chris is on here. I'm sure he would support any questions that you have on that and agree with me completely on that. So that's just a quick run through of what I thought additional priorities would be should we have additional funding on top of the original list Paul provided.
Okay, thank you, Rich. All right, so bottom line is if we recommended these 15, that would bring the ARPA monies from that other sheet up to 65. And I know Nancy, you'd mentioned originally your target was 60. I mean, it was 50. Again, I'll say I've got a bias towards as much capital as we possibly can because the amounts just the list is so long. So with that, I guess we'll just open it up. Are there any questions about any of these proposed scenarios or items that you think we should be including or not including, or items that we're including that we shouldn't be including, or anything like that, that just sort of what your thoughts are on any of these projects? I see Tom just stepped away. Yeah, go ahead,
I
Latanya.
have one question.
Sure.
Can we go back to the first list?
Sure.
Item E, Police Department headquarters elevator replacements for $2 million. Rich, can you explain that item in detail and the status of the headquarters and the need for an elevator replacement?
Yes, ma'am. So as you all know, the headquarters building over on Olive Street was reconditioned. It was bought. It was the old Sherwood Medical Building. The Police Foundation helped the city to fund the construction of the new police headquarters. The 3 elevators that are in need of replacement are original to that building. They were not replaced during the renovation of that facility. Where they are is there are 2 within the lobby of the building, which are integral to the vertical connectivity to the building other than a stairway. And so that is our ADA accessibility. And the 3rd is a freight service elevator near the north side of the building or on the back side of the building, which is utilized to, move different appurtenances around the building. Again, as I mentioned, these are original, and we have went in and staff has, my facility staff has, rebuilt controllers, control panels. They've fixed at our elevators contract, fix rails and different things within the elevators. It is very similar to the elevators at 1520 Market, the Civil Courts Building, City Hall. These elevators, what happens is they reach a useful life of about 20 to 25 years, and then the parts are nearly impossible to come by. So what happens is if a controller or part in those elevators go bad, we have to extract it and send it out to California, the one manufacturer who can repair things. And then at some point, they come back and tell us it is no longer able to be repaired. So we're at that point now where these elevators have issues continuously, the maintenance, the electricity they use, and the reliability. And beyond the fact that, I think everyone on this call would agree that elevators are very important to public safety and ADA requirements. And so, responsibly, when they are at that point of replacement, I have to tell you that now's the time. And I'm telling you that.
So these funds would be expended within this fiscal year?
Can you say that one more time, please?
The $2 million for the elevator replacements would be expended in this fiscal year?
Well, here's what would happen. So elevator replacement takes a substantial amount of time to order the parts and to get them in. If you notice City Hall, for example, we've been working on elevator replacements here for about 2 years. I would tell you, we would jump on this as soon as it got approved. We would spec out the elevators just like we did here. We would bid them. My bet is it would not be finished this fiscal year. It would probably be the following.
But we would use this $2 million in this fiscal year. We would expend it.
We would definitely encumber it for this project and we would get moving on it immediately.
Okay, my next question is the radio tower at the old police headquarters. What is the amount that we are spending on the radio tower to maintain that?
Okay, I don't have a maintenance cost of it, but the only thing that I had in here was that we had 1 or 2 things that we were going to do with it. If it stays where it is, then we need to upgrade the HVAC system for a couple $100,000 in it. If we move it to the new PSAP, which is what is desirable, that is a portion of the 32 million that is included in the estimated cost of that facility. So we're anticipating taking it off the old police headquarters and moving it to Jefferson Cass.
Okay. Because we don't know the savings at this point, if we would move to the PSAP, because we would not incur those costs over there at the old facility, is there any way we can allocate additional funds to the PSAP project outside of just the design? This is a one-time project, and I remember going to the credit rating agency and telling them that we would not finance this project due to the ARPA funds coming. So I'm wondering if we can allocate additional funds to this project. I'm really asking the committee to do that, to accelerate the project.
So if you would let me just tell you a little bit about the schedule, and that might help you formulate an opinion on what you'd like to do.
Okay,
So we started the feasibility study, and it's been on hold since May of 2020.
Hey, Rich, I can pull up the presentation. If
Okay.
it helps. Yeah,
That's
this is the presentation that was made on the PSAP, just to give you an idea. Okay, go ahead.
Great, Paul, thank you. That's helpful. So it's been on hold since May of 2020. So we're about 18 months behind schedule on where we would have been. So we have to, if we start this immediately, we finish the feasibility study, then we start our design. As you'll see by the schedule here, we're looking at about the first, and I'm going to say now because we've slipped a little bit, the second quarter of 23 for the design to be done. So we would not need more, in my opinion, than that $3.2 million until about the first or second quarter of 23. So that'll just kind of help frame this discussion a little bit.
so Paul, we have a deadline to spend ARPA funds, and that ends what, 2024, 2020?
Yeah, we have to have all funds committed by the end of 24 and all funds spent by the end of 26.
Okay.
And can I just go back and ask Rich, so on this schedule, we really don't know how much the PSAP is going to cost until we know what the design and construction is. Is that accurate?
So it is. I would say this, that while we were doing the feasibility study, the consultant put together a projected engineer's estimate. We honed those numbers down as closely as we could for a 17,000 square foot facility. But to your point, yes, we won't know exactly because it may take a little bit of a different concept than what it originally did, depending on what the input is, right?
Right. Yeah, and to Latanya's point, also, as everyone, because I've been hearing this too, and we talked a little bit about before the meeting about this, is that when everyone says, hey, we'll use this in the next tranche. I do want to remind everyone when we start talking about these tranches that yes, because let's say we've got the 3.2 in the design for the PSAP. That means we've got another 30 that we're going to have to take out of the next tranche. And we have to be prepared for that. So right off the top, that's the other, and the other big project that I want to make sure that, because we haven't allocated monies for, but we know it's on the radar screen, is the collector revenues system that needs to be replaced. That we have to do. And the only thing is we just don't know the dollar amount yet. But it's going to be, heck, that could be a $10 million plus item. So when we talk about, oh, we'll get it from the next tranche, we just have to remember that there are two big items out there already that we've identified that are going to have have a big claim on the next iteration of funds that we appropriate from one place or another.
I just don't see where it's probably cost effective to add money to the old police headquarters HVAC system or whatever else will be needed to keep that tower in operation. So we will have a savings if we do move that tower to the PSAP building. There will be a savings there. And all I'm asking is for the committee is to consider putting additional allocation to that project. There's a lot of economic benefit to that project forthcoming, especially when you're consolidating departments and workforce equipment. I mean, I see a lot of savings there. And I do not want to have to go back to our credit rating agency and say that we will need funding to finance the project at a later date.
Yeah, I would say that it depends on how high we want to go with this current appropriation. And again, and I'll leave that open to the committee as well. I know, Nancy, you had thoughts about what limits we're going to have. Right now, if we did everything on that proposed list plus the Rich's that list that we just did, we'd be about 65. So if we wanted to, right now we've got design for PSAP. If you wanted to go higher on PSAP, I mean, it's somewhat of a 6 of one, half dozen the other, because then it would reduce the other piece you need to add in. But it depends on where you want to be on the bottom line for ARPA at this point.
I guess,
Go ahead, Nancy.
no, I was gonna say, I guess my concern is that I'm not sure what the additional money can be used for, because we won't know what the design and construction is until they finish that. And maybe we try to push them to finish that a little bit earlier than the time frame that we currently have. So I'm just trying to figure out, that money would be sitting, which is fine, but I'm not sure how it helps us move the PSAP quicker, because it's not going to be an exorbitant amount. If the cost is really close to 32 million, if we put another 2 or 3 into the PSAP, then that 2 or 3 million is sitting, but I don't know that really gets us to be able to start doing the project. I'm not sure it would be enough for a federal match to do the project, and that is why I'm hesitant about moving more money into the PSAP itself. I would like to have more discussion about the other issue you raised, Latanya, which is, what actually do we have to do to the old police station until this building is built? Because if there are things that we could put off for a period of time, I'm not usually one to put stuff off, but I think that those construction type of things that are necessary if we're going to be at the police station for a long period of time is one thing, versus if this is just trying to hold it together until we move to a new facility. And I'm not a construction person, so I'm looking at Rich as somebody that might be able to answer some of that. But I think that's part of the issue, is like, we've proposed things to be fixed at the police station, old police station. How much do we really need to spend there until the new building is operational?
So what I had originally had was about 200,000 in this list to replace the HVAC for the tower. That is all that I am aware of that needs to be done over there to maintain it at the current time. I'm not aware of anything else. That is actually not included in this list as it got dropped out. And the idea, I guess, would be is that if I receive miscellaneous building funding, which we had talked about, my staff could cobble together at the most least expense, whatever it takes to keep that HVAC equipment going, knowing that the PSAP is going to happen and we're not investing in a new HVAC system. So I think we're already doing everything that we can do to minimize expending costs over there with that. But I'm not aware of anything else at this point.
So with the HVAC system, was that about 200,000?
Yes, but I
So
think,
why would you do I know that the academy works out of that building now too. So, and they complained this summer about the heat and the HVAC's not working well. Wouldn't it be better to do the HVACs than the tuck pointing?
no, because the HVAC in the academy, we already resolved that issue. There were some issues there. We resolved it. It is an old system, but it still works well. This HVAC is specifically on the 7th floor and keeps the tower radio equipment cool. That is all it does. And so in the Citizen Advisory Committee and this group, it was very clear to me that people thought that that was a lot of money considering we're thinking about moving to PSAP. My direction to staff would be is we're not replacing that system. We're going to do the PSAP. Your drive is to keep that thing operating for the next 2.5 years until we can get that tower relocated. The tuck pointing on the outside of the building, the academy building, is a public safety problem today. There are stones falling off the building onto the street. We have the street blocked. You know, there's no point anywhere in the future. We're getting rid of that building. We need to do that.
Hey, Rich, also can't some of those improvements, I know your team's pretty good at being innovative. Some of those improvements can be transferred to PSAP, could they not? I mean,
I would say this, that really, there's nothing that we're gonna do here that'll get transferred if we
Okay.
don't buy this new HVAC. The PSAP facility will be state-of-the-art,
all new.
up to all the standards for an operating 911 answering facility. It is gonna be a great,
Yeah,
wonderful addition to the city when we get done. So we don't wanna put old stuff in there if we don't have to.
okay.
So we will not be moving our radio tower? Is that what you're saying, Rich?
I don't know that specifically, whether we're gonna relocate it or build a new one, but I think the tower may in part get relocated. I think it gets disassembled and relocated. We're not that far along yet. I don't know.
Okay.
Any other questions about anything else on these, either of the two lists, or any other items that you want to talk about capital wise? So what I'd like to be able to do is take the two lists, consolidate them, revise them so that you've got what the latest and greatest version of them would be. Obviously, and Nancy, you might have thoughts on that, because we talked about, you know, what limit we want to do on ARPA or not. Obviously, I've said the more we can get into capital, as we've just discussed, the better. Simply because this list just is astronomically long. But what I could do is I could consolidate the list to give you the best and greatest scenario there. And my thinking would be that on Thursday we could go over it and come up with a recommendation if everyone's there. But I wanted to make sure that if there's something that we haven't considered, or if you have any other additional questions, that we can bring those up today.
I would say, Paul, you could consolidate them. I think it's good to keep the other priority items not funded above separate, because I am having conversations trying to move people, and it's easier for people if they know what we were sort of looking at before we talked about adding more money to this. You know, we're ever hopeful that the infrastructure reconciliation will pass, but until we actually see that, we don't know. So, and we could switch things. On the phone system, I'm still trying to figure out how that, I feel like, I think Alderwoman Davis is asking us, we kind of need more information on what that would look like and how we should do that. So I don't know where that falls in this group at this particular time. And I also hear Judy when she says, once it's started, you have to keep going. So I feel like we need to try and figure that out at some point, would be my.
Yeah, I think we need to get some expertise in on that as well. And again, I'll put my plug in. When Rich and I were talking about capital and just the lists that were provided, I just having gone through the Citizens Advisory Committee as well as this committee and going through it, it's a balancing act, and we know that the list is extremely long. But we wanted to be able to show that not only can we take care of some of the items that we know are essential to keeping operations going, keeping buildings going, and all that kind of stuff, but as well as some of the more visible capital improvements related to arterials and things like that. So we were trying to get a balance there. So yeah, that will be my pitch for the additional items that we had on the second page here that Rich went over today. But
I
okay.
have a question for you. What is the opportunity moving forward with Eco Devo funds under public safety for PSAP?
That's actually a good question. I think we should have, we've got the additional million because we didn't appropriate that this year, right? That's coming out of the regular operating budget for Eco Devo. But going forward, I mean, that the portion of the 10% of the Eco Devo is for public safety infrastructure. And I think we have a few things funded in there that aren't PSAP related. I know we've got the 911 system continually costs in there. I think we had something for SEMA, their emergency system. But other than that, on an annual basis, there is, we were out, again, originally, the original plan was you're doing the financing on PSAP, but we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be paying cash basis. But when we do the budget, there could be, you know, a couple $1 million there for PSAP as well. So that could be appropriated in the operating budget with the Eco Devo budget. So, but that's a good point, Rich.
So going down that line, does that mean next year we would have more GOB money as well?
I think the GOB money is going to start dwindling off because this was interest over unspent money, and as you spent and you continue to spend the money, it just declines. There might be a little bit, but not that much.
I thought I would just ask. You never know.
Yeah, no, that's turn over every rock, as we like to say. Yeah.
Which I assume that since we have the ARPA funding, we're not even going to consider a GOB for a couple of years.
No, actually, Latanya, there is a no tax increase opportunity next year. I think, is that right, Latanya?
Yes, we're in the midst of discussion on that project right now.
Yeah, I would think.
It's not a lot of, I will say this, it's not a lot of money available for other projects on this tranche, but we are considering going out for a no tax.
And in that regard, that's the kind of thing where you want to be strategic about your funds, because ARPA, again, you can't use ARPA to match federal monies. So let's say we've got other items that come with a federal match, and we're looking for local funds to match that. That could be a source from your GOB, or let's say that finally the government, the feds, come up with this federal infrastructure bill, and there are other opportunities for matching, and we don't have the match funds outside of ARPA. Then that would be another source. So yeah, I think that provides an opportunity for some of those type of funding arrangements. Okay, well, like I said, what I'd like to be able to do, I'll put together a new exhibit which incorporates the two together. But as you mentioned, Nancy, I could identify them separately as just sort of to keep them. This is what would be the additional list. And I'll circulate that before Thursday's meeting. Did you have something you wanted to say, Alderwoman Davis? No, okay.
Not really, no.
Okay, great. And I can put that together. I'll circulate that to members of the committee, and then we can discuss that at Thursday's meeting. If there is anything else that we need information on, or you'd like something in advance of Thursday, let me know, and I'll get it out and circulate it around so that we can have a full discussion of it on Thursday. Does that sound like a plan, everyone? Anything else to discuss? All right, well, very good. Thank you all for your participation, and we're meeting again Thursday afternoon. So we'll be discussing that, and hopefully we can get some recommendations out of that meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.